My name is Beverly, a 62-year-old widow who never imagined my own son would throw me out on the street. When Gerald discovered I'd lost my hospital administrator job, his cold words still echo. No one lives off charity here. Little did he know about my substantial savings, or that his name on my property deed was about to be cancelled. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. The Monday I reclaimed my life changed everything forever. Where were you when someone you trusted broke your heart? Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. Trust me, what happened next in my story will show you it's never too late to reclaim your power. For 35 years, I dedicated my life to Riverside Memorial Hospital. I started as a billing clerk right out of college and worked my way up to becoming a senior hospital administrator. My career was demanding but fulfilling. I took pride in helping our healthcare system run smoothly, even if most patients never knew my name or saw my face behind the scenes. Howard and I met in the hospital cafeteria when he came to visit his mother after her surgery. He was handsome in a quiet way, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Our love wasn't the passionate whirlwind you see in movies, but something steady and true that grew stronger with each passing year. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family present. We built a beautiful life together in our modest 3-bedroom home on Maple Street. Howard worked as an engineering professor at the local university, and together we raised our only son, Gerald. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We saved diligently for retirement, took one nice vacation each year, and put Gerald through college without him needing student loans. I thought we had done everything right. Howard's death 3 years ago came without warning. One moment he was mowing the lawn on a Saturday morning, and the next, he was clutching his chest and collapsing in our backyard. The paramedics said it was a massive heart attack. Despite working in healthcare my entire career, nothing prepared me for the shock of losing my partner of nearly 40 years. The grief consumed me entirely. I took a month off work, barely leaving our bedroom. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now echoed with Howard's absence. His coffee mug in the cabinet, his reading glasses on the nightstand, his shirt still hanging in the closet. Each item a painful reminder that he was gone forever. When I returned to work, I threw myself into it completely. Staying busy helped keep the depression at bay during the day, but the evenings were unbearable. Our king-sized bed felt enormous without Howard's reassuring presence beside me. I started sleeping on the couch most nights, unable to face the emptiness of our bedroom. Despite having good insurance, Howard's final medical bills were substantial. The ambulance, emergency room, and unsuccessful resuscitation attempts added up quickly. Then came the funeral expenses. I dipped into our savings, telling myself Howard would want me to give him a proper goodbye. My financial situation wasn't dire, but it felt precarious without Howard's professor's salary complementing mine. The property taxes on our home had increased substantially over the years, and maintenance costs for the aging house were becoming a concern. I had our retirement savings, but I was terrified of touching that money before I actually retired. Gerald started suggesting I sell the house about 6 months after Howard died. "It's too big for just you, Mom," he would say during his increasingly infrequent visits. "You're rattling around in there all alone. It doesn't make sense financially." I resisted the idea fiercely at first. This was the home Howard and I had built together. We had brought Gerald home from the hospital to this house. Every corner held memories I wasn't ready to part with. The thought of strangers living in our space, changing the wall colors, and replacing our carefully tended garden made me physically ill. But Gerald persisted, and eventually made what seemed like a generous offer. "Why don't you come live with us? We have the extra bedroom since we finished the basement. The kids would love having you around, and you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining a whole house." The idea had its appeal. I adored my grandchildren, Alice and Dylan. At 10 and 7, they were at such wonderful ages. Curious, affectionate, and full of energy. The thought of seeing them daily, instead of just on occasional weekends, was tempting. And Gerald was right that the house felt too empty, too full of ghosts. After much consideration, I proposed a compromise. Instead of selling the house, I would rent it out. The rental income would provide additional financial security, and I could move in with Gerald and his family while keeping my property. If the living arrangement didn't work out, I would have options. Gerald seemed pleased with this solution, and his wife Tiffany made all the right noises about looking forward to having me. They lived in a newer, larger home in a suburban development about 30 minutes from my place. It had 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a fenced backyard for the kids. On paper, there was plenty of room for me. I hired a property management company to handle the rental of my home, packed up my most treasured belongings, and moved most of my furniture into storage. I told myself this was just the next chapter in my life, one that would bring me closer to my remaining family. Howard would have wanted me to move forward. The day I moved in, Gerald and the kids made a welcome grandma banner that they hung over the front door. Alice had picked flowers from the garden and placed them in a vase on my new dresser. Dylan insisted on carrying my most important bag, which happened to contain my slippers and bathrobe. These small gestures of welcome brought tears to my eyes. For the first time since Howard died, I felt a spark of hope for the future. I never imagined how quickly that hope would turn to ashes. The first few weeks in Gerald and Tiffany's home were pleasant enough. I had a comfortable bedroom in the finished basement with my own bathroom. It wasn't as private as having my own home, but I tried to view it as a fresh start. I established a routine of waking early, making coffee for everyone, and having breakfast ready before the children needed to leave for school. I wanted to contribute to the household, to show my appreciation for being welcomed into their space. I took over most of the cooking duties, preparing elaborate dinners that Gerald had loved as a child. I kept the kitchen spotless, did laundry while everyone was at work or school, and picked up the children from their after-school activities when Gerald and Tiffany were busy. "You don't have to do all this, Beverly," Tiffany said one evening as I washed dishes after dinner. Her tone was polite, but something in her expression seemed strained. "We didn't ask you to be our housekeeper." "I know, dear. I just want to help out since you're both so busy with work," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "It gives me something to do during the day." Financially, I insisted on contributing as well. I paid them rent each month, though Gerald initially protested. "Consider it my share of the mortgage and utilities," I told him firmly. I also bought groceries regularly and paid for family outings to restaurants or movies. I didn't want anyone to think I was taking advantage. Despite my efforts, I began noticing subtle shifts in Gerald and Tiffany's attitudes after the first 2 months. Comments about finances became more frequent, often delivered with a smile but carrying an undercurrent of resentment. "These organic vegetables are so expensive, Mom," Gerald remarked while unpacking groceries I had purchased. "We usually just get the regular ones." "The heating bill was higher last month," Tiffany mentioned casually over breakfast. "Probably because someone keeps turning up the thermostat." Her eyes flicked meaningfully toward me, though I had been wearing extra sweaters specifically to avoid adjusting the temperature. My relationships with my grandchildren remained the bright spot in the arrangement. Alice would sit with me in the evenings, showing me her homework or reading aloud from her favorite books. Dylan would beg me to play board games or help him build elaborate structures with his building blocks. I treasured these moments, storing them up like precious jewels against the growing coldness from their parents. Tensions with Tiffany increased gradually. I would catch her rearranging the kitchen after I had cooked, implying that I hadn't organized things properly. She would remind me about household rules I hadn't broken or make pointed comments about clutter if I left a magazine on the coffee table. Each incident was minor, but they accumulated like snow on a rooftop, getting heavier by the day. Through it all, I maintained my job at the hospital, despite having enough years of service to retire comfortably. The work gave me purpose, and importantly, financial independence. I was careful with my money, maintaining separate accounts that Gerald knew nothing about. The rental income from my house went directly into savings, building a nest egg that gave me security. The property deed situation had occurred during a vulnerable moment after Howard's death. In my grief-stricken state, I had added Gerald's name to the deed, thinking it would simplify things if anything happened to me. The paperwork had been initiated, but required a final signature and filing that I had never completed, a detail Gerald wasn't aware of. As months passed, the feeling of being unwelcome intensified. My basement bedroom, once presented as a private suite, became a storage area for holiday decorations and outgrown children's clothes. Family conversations would stop abruptly when I entered a room. Dinner invitations from their friends mysteriously never included me. "Do you think Grandma will live with us forever?" I overheard Alice asking her mother one afternoon. "I hope not, sweetie," Tiffany replied, unaware I was just around the corner. This was supposed to be temporary. I retreated to my room, heart heavy with the realization that I had become an unwanted burden in my son's home. But I still had my job, my savings, and my rented house. I had options. I just didn't realize how soon I would need them. The hospital merger announcement came on a Tuesday morning staff meeting. Riverside Memorial, where I had worked for over 3 decades, was being acquired by National Health Systems, a corporate giant known for aggressive cost-cutting measures. Our CEO tried to present the merger as an exciting opportunity, but the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew what corporate acquisitions typically meant: restructuring, department consolidations, and layoffs. "We'll be evaluating all positions over the next month," the HR director explained with practiced neutrality. "Some redundancies are inevitable, but we'll work to retain as many staff as possible." I tried not to worry. With my experience and institutional knowledge, surely I would be considered essential personnel. I had survived hospital reorganizations before. Besides, at 62, I was only a few years from retirement anyway. They wouldn't push out someone so close to the finish line, would they? 3 weeks later, I was called into a meeting with the new regional director and the HR manager. The conference room felt unusually cold as I took a seat across from them. Their expressions told me everything before they said a word. "Beverly, as you know, we've been reviewing all administrative positions following the merger," the regional director began, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your service to Riverside has been exemplary, but we're implementing a new management structure that eliminates several senior administrative roles, including yours." Despite anticipating this possibility, the words hit me like a physical blow. 35 years of dedication, of early mornings and late nights, of missed family events because the hospital needed me, all reduced to a corporate decision about redundancies. The HR manager slid a folder across the table. "We've prepared a severance package that recognizes your years of service. You'll receive 6 months' salary, extended health benefits, and career transition services." I nodded mechanically as they outlined the details, but their voices seemed to come from far away. All I could think about was what this meant for my living situation with Gerald. My job had been my shield, my guarantee of independence. The following weeks were a blur of exit interviews, cleaning out my office, and tearful goodbyes to colleagues who had become like family. I received glowing reference letters and promises to stay in touch that we all knew would fade with time. The hospital organized a retirement party, though we all knew this wasn't the retirement I had planned. At 62, finding comparable employment proved nearly impossible. I updated my resume and applied for administrative positions at other healthcare facilities, but interviews were scarce. When they did occur, I could see the calculation behind the interviewer's eyes. Why invest in someone who might retire in a few years? "We're looking for someone who can grow with the organization long term," one hiring manager told me kindly but firmly. "I'm afraid we've decided to go with a candidate whose experience is more current," said another. The rejection letters piled up, each one chipping away at my confidence. After the 15th form letter thanking me for my interest, but choosing another candidate, I stopped counting. I began to consider that perhaps retirement was my only option. I sat down with my financial documents, calculating what my severance package, Social Security, pension, and savings would provide. The rental income from my house was steady, and I had been prudent with my money throughout my career. To my surprise, the numbers showed I could retire comfortably if I budgeted carefully. This realization should have brought relief, but instead, it filled me with anxiety. Without my job, how would Gerald perceive me? Would he see me as a burden, a charity case living in his basement? The thought made my stomach churn. I decided not to tell Gerald immediately about losing my job. I needed time to process this change and develop a plan before facing his reaction. Each morning, I would dress in my work clothes, take my briefcase, and leave the house at the usual time. Instead of going to the hospital, I would spend hours at the public library researching retirement options, or at the local coffee shop applying for positions online. This deception couldn't last forever, but it bought me precious time to consider my options. I contacted a financial advisor discreetly, explored senior living communities, and researched apartments in the area. I even began tentatively looking into reclaiming my house once the current rental lease expired. As I dug deeper into my financial situation, I discovered something surprising. Between my pension, Social Security, savings, and rental income, I was actually in a strong financial position. The years of careful saving and investment had paid off. I could afford to live independently and comfortably for the rest of my life. This knowledge was empowering, but I still dreaded Gerald discovering the truth about my employment status. I didn't have to wait long for my fears to be realized. The day Gerald discovered I'd lost my job began like any other. I dressed in a professional outfit, packed my lunch, and was preparing to leave for another day of pretending to go to work when the phone rang. I hesitated before answering, but Gerald was in the shower, and Tiffany was upstairs helping the children get ready for school. "Hello, Beverly speaking," I answered, trying to sound casual. "Hi, Beverly. This is Amanda from HR at Riverside Memorial," said the cheerful voice on the other end. "I'm calling to confirm your address for sending your final pension paperwork and tax documents." My heart sank. "I thought those were being emailed," I whispered, glancing nervously toward the stairs. "We send hard copies as well for your records. I just wanted to verify we have your current address since you've moved." I gave her Gerald's address quickly, trying to end the call, but it was too late. Gerald had appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair still damp from his shower, a strange expression on his face. "Who was that, Mom?" he asked after I hung up, his voice carefully neutral. For a moment, I considered inventing some explanation, but the weight of the past week's deception suddenly felt unbearable. "It was HR from the hospital," I admitted, setting my briefcase down. "I need to tell you something, Gerald." We sat at the kitchen table, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows, creating a deceptively cheerful atmosphere for such a difficult conversation. "The hospital merged with National Health Systems last month," I began, folding my hands to keep them from trembling. "There were layoffs across all departments, especially in administration. My position was eliminated 3 weeks ago." Gerald's expression hardened with each word. "3 weeks? You've been pretending to go to work for 3 weeks." I nodded, shame washing over me. I needed time to figure things out, to make a plan. "A plan for what? And why didn't you tell me immediately?" His voice rose sharply. "I was afraid of exactly this reaction," I said quietly. "I didn't want you to worry or to think of me differently." Gerald stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. "So you've been lying to us, leaving every day under false pretenses. Do you know how that looks? I'm sorry for the deception, but I'm not a child who needs supervision. I've been using this time productively to explore my options." "Options?" Gerald scoffed. "Mom, you're 62. What options do you have?" His dismissive tone ignited something in me. "I have plenty of options, Gerald. I received a generous severance package. I have my pension, savings, and the rental income from my house." Tiffany appeared in the doorway, clearly having overheard. "Is everything okay? The kids are almost ready for school." Gerald turned to her. "Mom got laid off 3 weeks ago and didn't bother to tell us. She's been pretending to go to work every day." Tiffany's eyes widened, then narrowed as she looked at me. "That's disturbing, Beverly. We've welcomed you into our home, and you've been lying to us." "I made a mistake in not telling you sooner," I acknowledged. "But my financial situation is my business, and I needed time to assess it properly." "Your financial situation is absolutely our business when you're living under our roof," Gerald snapped. "We agreed to this arrangement when you were employed and contributing. That's changed now." "I can still contribute," I insisted. "My financial situation is actually quite stable. The rental income alone would cover what I've been paying you." Gerald shook his head dismissively. "That's not the point. We can't have someone living here who isn't working, who isn't productive." "I'm your mother, Gerald, not someone," I said, hurt blooming in my chest. "And that's exactly why this is so disappointing. he replied coldly. You should have been honest with us from the beginning. Alice and Dylan appeared, backpacks ready, their young faces confused by the tension in the room. Why is everyone yelling? Dylan asked, his lower lip trembling. Everything's fine, sweetie, Tiffany said quickly. Grandma and Daddy are just having an adult conversation. Let's get you both to the car. After Tiffany ushered the children out, Gerald turned back to me, his expression resolute. I think it's time we reconsidered this living arrangement. What exactly does that mean? I asked, though I already knew. It means that no one lives off charity in this house. We all contribute, we all work. That was our agreement. I am contributing, I protested. I cook, I clean, I help with the children. And I can still pay rent. It's not about the money, Gerald insisted, though his tone suggested otherwise. It's about values. What example does it set for the kids if their grandmother is content to just exist without purpose? Existing without purpose? I repeated incredulously. Is that what you think retirement is? After working for 35 years. You're not of retirement age yet, he countered. And you didn't choose retirement. You got laid off and hid it from us. The conversation deteriorated from there. Gerald's words became increasingly harsh, cutting deeper than I thought possible from my own child. When he finally delivered his ultimatum, it felt almost like a relief, a clarification of where we stood. I think you should find your own place, he stated flatly. You have 1 week. That should be enough time with your options. I sat frozen, staring at my son, this stranger wearing Gerald's face. The boy I had nursed through chickenpox and driven to countless soccer practices. The young man whose college graduation had filled me with such pride. The father I had watched welcome his own children into the world. Now he was evicting me with the cold efficiency of a landlord dealing with a problematic tenant. No one lives off charity here, he repeated, the phrase that would echo in my mind for weeks to come. 1 week, Mom. Figure it out. As he walked out, car keys jingling in his hand, I remained at the kitchen table, the morning sunlight now feeling like a spotlight on my humiliation. In that moment I realized that the son I thought I knew had never really existed. The man who had just dismissed me from his life was a stranger, shaped by values I didn't recognize and certainly hadn't taught him. I had 1 week to rebuild my life from scratch. And despite the pain crushing my chest, a small voice inside me whispered that perhaps this was a blessing in disguise. A forced liberation from a situation that had been slowly suffocating me. The house fell silent after Gerald left for work. I sat motionless at the kitchen table, his cruel words still ringing in my ears. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, much like the relationship with my son. 1 week. 7 days to completely uproot my life again. The enormity of the task before me was paralyzing. Eventually, I forced myself to stand. Practical considerations began to push through the emotional fog. I needed a place to stay. I needed to retrieve my things from storage. I needed to contact my attorney about the property deed. The mental list grew longer with each passing minute. I returned to my basement bedroom and surveyed the space that had been my home for the past 8 months. Despite living here, I had never fully unpacked. Some part of me had always known this arrangement was temporary. Cardboard boxes still lined one wall, containing photo albums, Howard's belongings I couldn't bear to part with, and mementos from a happier time. With methodical precision born of shock, I began packing my clothes. Each item folded and placed in a suitcase represented another severing of ties with my son's household. The few decorative items I had displayed, a small ceramic vase Howard had given me on our 20th anniversary, a framed photo of my parents, a handmade quilt from my grandmother, were carefully wrapped and boxed. While sorting through a drawer, I found an old photo album I had forgotten about. It fell open to a picture of Gerald at his 5th birthday party. His face was alight with joy as he blew out the candles on a homemade cake shaped like a fire truck. Howard stood behind him, hands on his little shoulders, beaming with pride. I was next to them, younger and happier, unaware of how life would unfold. The contrast between that smiling little boy and the cold man who had just evicted me was too much. Tears spilled down my cheeks, falling onto the plastic-covered photograph. I closed the album and set it aside, unable to reconcile these two versions of my son, Midway through packing, my phone rang. It was Marlene, my oldest friend. We had started at the hospital together as young women and had remained close through marriages, children, and now Howard's death. She was one of the few people who knew about my job loss. "Just checking in on you, Bev." Her warm voice came through the speaker. "How are things going with the job search?" The simple question of concern broke the dam. Through sobs, I explained the morning's confrontation and Gerald's ultimatum. Marlene's outrage on my behalf was immediate and fierce. "That ungrateful little. After everything you've done for him," she fumed. "Where does he get the nerve?" "I don't know where I went wrong with him, Marlene," I whispered. "You didn't go wrong," she insisted. "Some people just reveal who they truly are when money is involved. This isn't your fault." As my tears subsided, Marlene made a practical suggestion. "My spare bedroom is yours for as long as you need it."
No arguments.
"I'm living in that condo all by myself anyway." Relief flooded through me. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "Impose? Beverly Armstrong, we've known each other for 40 years. You were there for me through my divorce and Kathy's wedding. This isn't even a question. Pack your bags and come over today." With somewhere to go, my sense of purpose returned. I called a storage facility and arranged for a small unit to hold my belongings until I found a permanent solution. Next, I contacted the property management company handling my rental house to inquire about the current lease terms and when I might be able to reclaim the property if needed. Finally, I called Sandra, an attorney I had consulted after Howard's death. Her secretary put me through immediately. "Beverly, it's been a while," Sandra greeted me. "How can I help you today?" "I need to discuss the deed to my house," I explained. "After Howard died, I started the process of adding Gerald's name, but I don't believe it was ever finalized. I need to confirm that and potentially cancel it entirely." "I can check that for you right away," she assured me. "And Beverly? Whatever's happening, remember that property rights are complex. Don't make any hasty decisions based on family pressure." Her words reminded me that I wasn't powerless. I had options, resources, and professionals ready to help me navigate this situation. For the first time since the morning confrontation, I felt a glimmer of control returning. That evening, I faced the difficult task of saying goodbye to my grandchildren. Tiffany had picked them up from school and explained in her own way that Grandma would be moving to her own place. Both children were confused and upset. "But why can't you stay with us?" Alice asked, her small face crumpled with distress. "Sometimes adults need their own space, sweetheart," I explained gently, avoiding the painful truth. "But I'll still see you often, I promise." "Can we visit you at your new house?" Dylan asked hopefully. "Of course you can," I assured him, though I had no idea if Gerald and Tiffany would allow it. "And we'll have special outings together, just like always." I hugged them tightly, breathing in the scent of their shampoo and memorizing the feel of their small arms around my neck. They were innocent casualties in this adult conflict, and my heart broke knowing our daily connection would be severed. Gerald didn't come home that evening, a cowardly avoidance that was perhaps a blessing. I couldn't bear another confrontation, and his absence allowed me to say proper goodbyes to the children without additional tension. Tiffany maintained a cold politeness, barely meeting my eyes as I loaded my packed suitcases into my car. "I'll have the rest of my things moved out tomorrow," I told her. "Please let Gerald know." She nodded stiffly. "I think that's best for everyone." As I drove away from the house that night, headed for Marlene's condo, I caught a last glimpse of Alice and Dylan waving from the front window. I waved back, forcing a smile until I turned the corner, and they disappeared from view. Only then did I allow myself to break down again, pulling over to the side of the road as sobs racked my body. When the tears finally subsided, I felt hollowed out but somehow lighter. The worst had happened. My son had rejected me, had shown his true colors in the harshest possible way. There was a strange freedom in having the illusion stripped away completely. Now I could rebuild my life on solid ground, without the shifting sands of Gerald's conditional acceptance. I started the car again and continued toward Marlene's, leaving behind not just my temporary housing but the last vestiges of a relationship that had proven to be built on sand rather than the bedrock of family love I had always believed in. Marlene's modern two-bedroom condo couldn't have been more different from Gerald's suburban home, or my own house on Maple Street. Located on the 10th floor of a downtown building, its floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping views of the city skyline. The spare bedroom was minimally furnished but spotlessly clean, with a comfortable queen bed and an attached bathroom. "It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need," Marlene said, helping me carry in my suitcases. "I've cleared half the closet and the top 2 dresser drawers." "It's perfect," I assured her, though perfect was the last word I would have chosen for my circumstances. "I can't thank you enough, Marlene. Stop thanking me and start telling me what you need," she replied practically. "Wine? Food? A shoulder to cry on? Or maybe the name of a good hitman for that son of yours?" She winked to show she was joking, mostly. That first night, we sat on her balcony with glasses of wine, the city lights twinkling below us like earthbound stars. The emotional dam broke again, and I poured out every detail of the past 8 months living with Gerald and Tiffany. The subtle comments, the growing tension, the feeling of being unwelcome in what was supposed to be my new home. "I gave him everything," I said, wiping tears from my cheeks. "Howard and I sacrificed so much to give him opportunities. We paid for his college, helped with the down payment on his first house. How could he treat me like this?" Marlene reached over and squeezed my hand. "Some people view love as transactional. They keep a mental ledger of what they're owed and what they owe. Gerald seems to think once you stopped working, you stopped having value." Her words hurt because they rang true. Gerald had always been materialistic, even as a child. He measured success in possessions and status, values that neither Howard nor I had taught him. Somehow, we had raised a son whose moral compass pointed toward wealth rather than compassion. The next few days were a blur of practical arrangements. The movers collected my remaining belongings from Gerald's basement and transferred them to the storage unit I had rented. I contacted my bank to ensure Gerald had no access to any of my accounts. I met with Thomas, my financial advisor, for a comprehensive review of my situation. Thomas's office was warm and inviting, with certificates on the wall and family photos on his desk. He had helped Howard and me plan for retirement for years, and his familiar face was comforting in the midst of so much upheaval. "Let's look at where you stand, Beverly," he said, turning his computer screen so I could see it. "Your severance package from the hospital is quite generous. 6 months' salary plus extended health benefits." He clicked through several screens, showing me charts and projections. "Your pension is fully vested, and you can begin collecting it immediately if you choose. Social Security can start at 62 with reduced benefits, or you can wait until full retirement age for the maximum amount." The numbers were reassuring. Between my pension, Social Security, and the rental income from my house, I would have a steady monthly income that more than covered my needs. Additionally, the retirement accounts Howard and I had faithfully contributed to over the decades had grown substantially. "The bottom line," Thomas concluded, "is that you're in excellent financial shape. You could buy a new house outright if you wanted to, though I'd recommend keeping that money invested and taking out a small mortgage instead." I left his office with a printed financial plan and a renewed sense of security. Gerald's accusation about living off charity was not just cruel but laughably incorrect. I was, by any reasonable standard, financially independent and secure. This realization helped soothe the raw wound of his rejection, but other emotional injuries remained. I began seeing Diana, a therapist specializing in family trauma, who helped me process the complex grief I was experiencing. Not just for Howard, but for the relationship with my son I had thought existed. "You're mourning an illusion," Diana explained during one session. "The loving son you thought you had. It's similar to discovering infidelity in a marriage. The person you trusted wasn't who you thought they were." "How could I have been so blind?" I asked. "Were there signs I missed?" Diana shook her head. "Don't blame yourself for expecting basic decency from your child. Gerald's behavior reflects his character, not your parenting." These sessions with Diana became an anchor in the stormy weeks that followed. She helped me understand that while Gerald's actions had revealed his true character, they didn't define my worth or my future. Meanwhile, the situation with Gerald had grown more complicated. Apparently, he had been sharing his version of events with extended family members. My nephew called, awkwardly asking if I needed financial help, having been told by Gerald that I was struggling after losing my job. My sister-in-law emailed to say that Gerald was very concerned about my mental state and decision-making. These manipulations ignited something beyond hurt in me, genuine anger. The sadness that had dominated my emotional landscape began to transform into righteous indignation. Gerald wasn't just rejecting me. He was actively working to reshape the narrative, casting himself as the concerned son dealing with a problematic mother rather than a man who had evicted his recently widowed parent. This anger, while painful, was also energizing. It pushed me to take more definitive action to protect myself and my assets. I scheduled another meeting with Sandra, my attorney, to discuss the property deed and my legal rights. Sandra's office was in an old converted Victorian house downtown, with original woodwork and stained glass windows that contrasted with the modern computers and law books. She greeted me warmly but with the professional demeanor that had made her one of the most respected elder law attorneys in the city. "I've reviewed the deed situation," she said, opening a folder on her desk. "And I have good news. While you did initiate the process of adding Gerald's name to the property deed after Howard's death, the transfer was never finalized. There was a required notarized signature that wasn't completed, and the amended deed was never properly filed with the county." Relief washed over me. "So the house is still solely in my name?" "Absolutely," Sandra confirmed. "You are the sole legal owner of the property on Maple Street. Gerald has no claim to it whatsoever." "Can he challenge that somehow?" I asked, thinking of his recent pattern of behavior. "He can try, but he won't succeed," Sandra assured me. "The legal documentation is clear. Your house is your house, Beverly." With this knowledge, a plan began to take shape in my mind. The current tenant's lease on my house would expire in 3 months. I could reclaim my property then if I wanted to, or I could sell it and purchase something smaller, more suited to my needs as a single person. Either way, the decision was entirely mine. As I left Sandra's office, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks seemed to lighten. Gerald had attempted to strip me of my dignity, my security, and my place in the family. But he couldn't take my financial independence or my legal rights to my own property. Monday was approaching, the day I would officially cancel any possibility of Gerald's name being added to my deed. It would be a small act legally, since the transfer had never been completed anyway, but symbolically it represented my declaration of independence from a son who had proven himself unworthy of my trust. As I walked back to Marlene's condo that afternoon, the autumn sunlight warming my face, I realized I was no longer just a victim of Gerald's cruelty. I was a woman reclaiming her power one decision at a time. 6 months have passed since that Monday morning when I sat in Sandra's office and officially rescinded the incomplete deed transfer that would have added Gerald's name to my property. 6 months of rebuilding, reflecting, and rediscovering who Beverly Armstrong is beyond being Howard's wife or Gerald's mother. I'm sitting on the patio of my new condo, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. It's smaller than my house on Maple Street but perfect for my needs. 2 bedrooms, an open floor plan, and a maintenance-free lifestyle. I sold the family home 3 months ago, a decision that brought both grief and liberation. The proceeds from the sale, combined with my existing savings, have secured my financial future beyond any doubt. My journey to healing began with those initial sessions with Diana, my therapist, but it's been a winding road with unexpected turns. The first few months were the hardest. Despite Gerald's cruelty, I found myself making excuses for him, blaming myself, searching for some explanation that would make his behavior comprehensible. Diana gently but firmly helped me see the pattern of materialistic values that had always been present in Gerald, values that neither Howard nor I had instilled. Some children develop their own value systems despite their upbringing, she explained during one particularly difficult session. You and Howard modeled generosity and compassion, but Gerald chose a different path. Accepting this truth was painful but necessary. I had to acknowledge that the son I thought I had raised existed only in my mind, not in reality. The real Gerald had shown himself clearly the day he evicted me from his home. My friendship with Marlene proved invaluable during this period. She provided not just temporary housing but unwavering support. On days when grief overwhelmed me, she would simply sit with me, validating my feelings without trying to fix them. On better days, she would encourage me to join her for walks, community events, or dinner with her vibrant circle of friends. Through Marlene, I met Gloria, a retired teacher whose son hadn't spoken to her in 15 years for reasons she never fully understood. Her resilience inspired me. I spent 5 years waiting for him to come back to explain. She told me over coffee one afternoon. Then I realized I was putting my life on hold for someone who didn't value it. That's when my real healing began. Gloria introduced me to a support group for parents estranged from adult children. Hearing others' stories helped me understand that family estrangement is far more common than I had realized, and that it often says more about the adult child's issues than the parent's failures. This knowledge didn't erase the pain, but it helped me carry it more easily. Gradually, I began to rediscover interests and passions that had been buried under decades of work and family responsibilities. I joined a community choir, something I had always wanted to do but never found time for. My voice, rusty at first, grew stronger with each rehearsal. There was something profoundly healing about creating harmony with others, about being part of something larger than myself. I volunteered at a literacy program, helping adults learn to read or improve their English skills. The gratitude in their eyes when they mastered a difficult text reminded me that I still had much to contribute. My hospital administration skills proved unexpectedly useful in helping the program organize its resources more efficiently. Physical activity became another cornerstone of my healing. I started with gentle yoga classes designed for seniors, then added daily walks that grew longer and more vigorous as my strength increased. The endorphins from exercise help combat the depression that sometimes threatened to engulf me, especially on significant dates like Howard's birthday or our anniversary. My relationship with my grandchildren required careful navigation. Gerald and Tiffany initially restricted access, claiming the children were confused by the situation. But Alice and Dylan began asking to see me with such persistence that they eventually relented. Our visits are now regular but supervised, a compromise that pains me but allows me to maintain connection with the children I adore. During one such visit, Alice asked the question I had been dreading. "Why did you leave us, Grandma? Daddy says you chose to go away." I was careful not to contradict her father directly. Sometimes adults have different ideas about what's best, I explained. I love you and Dylan very much, and I always will, no matter where I live. This seemed to satisfy her, though I know harder questions will come as the children grow older and more perceptive. I'm preparing for that day, working with Diana to find age-appropriate ways to explain complex family dynamics without vilifying their father. Gerald has made several attempts at reconciliation, each one revealing his true motivations. The first came shortly after he learned I had sold the family home for a substantial profit. His text message expressed concern about my decision-making and offered to help manage my finances. I didn't respond. The second attempt coincided with his discovery that the deed transfer had never been completed. His angry phone call accused me of deception, of going behind his back to secure the property for myself. The irony of his accusation was almost laughable. The most recent overture came last month, a carefully worded email suggesting we put the past behind us and restore our family bond. What was notably absent was any acknowledgement of his behavior, any apology for his cruelty, or any indication that he understood the pain he had caused. It was, in essence, an invitation to pretend the estrangement had never happened, rather than to genuinely heal the relationship. After consultation with Diana, I responded with boundaries rather than bridges. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, I wrote. But that process must begin with honesty about what occurred between us and accountability for the hurt caused. When you're ready for that conversation, I'll be here. He hasn't responded, and I'm not expecting him to. True reconciliation would require a level of self-reflection and empathy that Gerald has never demonstrated. I've accepted that our relationship may never heal, and while that knowledge brings sadness, it no longer devastates me. What would Howard think of all this? I ask myself this question often, especially in quiet moments like this sunset. I believe he would be heartbroken about Gerald's choices but proud of how I've reclaimed my life. Howard always valued resilience and authenticity above all else. He would want me to live fully and joyfully, even without our son's presence. Last week I had dinner with Frank, a widower I met through the community choir. It wasn't a date exactly, just two people sharing a meal and conversation, but it represented another step in my journey forward. We talked about our late spouses, our children, his are supportive and present, and our adjustments to solo living. For the first time in years, I felt the spark of connection with someone who understood loss but wasn't defined by it. The healing isn't complete, and perhaps it never will be. There are still days when grief ambushes me, when I see a father and adult son laughing together at a restaurant and feel the acute absence of what might have been. But these moments no longer derail me. They're part of my story now, not the whole of it. If there's wisdom I've gained from this painful chapter, it's this: our worth isn't determined by others' assessment of us, even those closest to us. True security comes not from property deeds or bank accounts, though those matter, but from knowing who you are and standing firmly in that truth. To anyone watching who might be facing family estrangement or betrayal, I want you to know that healing is possible. The path isn't linear or predictable, but with each step forward, the pain recedes a little more. Surround yourself with people who value you, engage in activities that bring meaning, and be patient with your heart as it learns to beat to a new rhythm. Have you experienced family betrayal? How did you find your way forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and renewal. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message of hope after heartbreak, please share it with them. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power and write a new chapter in your story. Until next time, this is Beverly wishing you strength, healing, and the courage to stand in your truth.